Hello, good evening. Okay, today we are gonna share about how the United States become a country. Okay, let's start it. This land has been home to people for thousands of years. But 200 years ago, this group of British colonists declared themselves the United States of America. The country was spread to become the USA we know today. But the story of how it becomes a country in the first place starts here in Spain in 1492. The Spanish particularly wanted a more secure route to get trade goods from Asia. And Christopher Columbus volunteers to sail west from Europe to try to find a sort of round the world way to get to Asia. But nobody knew there was an entire continent in the way. So when Columbus found islands here in the Caribbean, he assumes he's from Asia. Contrary to popular belief, Christopher Columbus never set foot on what is now the continental United States. But it's a discovery that completely changes the course of human history. It starts a wave of European crossings the Atlantic to explore this new land. And by the late 1500s, Britain sees an opportunity. The Spanish by this point have been bringing back not only the kinds of trade goods that people expected, but also lots of gold and silver, and Spain, and as rival of England, is becoming wealthier and more powerful, and the England monarchy wants to get a piece of this. With the Spanish focus further south, other European countries look to the north. The British attempt to set up a colony here in 1585 and thus failed. But in 1607, they try again. They established their first permanent settlement and called it Jamestown. They named the region Virginia. Thousands more settlers followed. Some come looking for religious freedom. For others, it's about the opportunity to make money. But these colonizations come at the expense of the millions of people who already lived there. Near the British colonies, there was great devastation for the native populations. They often suffer from diseases like smallpox that the Europeans brought. They suffer from wars fought against the Europeans, and gradually those nations that were close to the European colonies had to sell land, give up land to the colonies, and find a sort of way of living within the colonies. The colonies start growing tobacco, but they need workers for the plantations. Their answer was the African slave trade. By the time the United States would become a country of its own, hundreds of thousands of people had been forcibly brought from Africa to America. Slavery just really drives so much of the labor system in the United States. In the South is the agricultural system. In the North is the industrial and the domestic services industries that are filled with enslaved Africans, and it's not until 1800s and specifically the time around the Civil War where Americans really have to reckon with whether or not they can continue to be country with the morals that they espouse and still practice African bondage. The colonists spread north and south. By 1732, these 13 very separate colonies are established. They are not coherent at all. They are quite different from one another. They were settled in different ways. They have very different economies. They have great prejudices against one another. But what they share is their British identity. The colonists all look to Britain as their real home. It would be crazy to imagine, even just a few years before the American Revolution, that these diverse colonists would somehow, against their interests, decide to band together against their mother country. The road to that revolution starts in the 1750s. Britain and its colonies in America fight a war against France, Britain's bitter enemy. By this time, the French also claim huge territories in North America, but after the war, they lose much of it. They lose much of it to Britain. And the king becomes worried that if the British colonies expand into these islands or this land, it could start a new war with the native population. The colonists always wanted to push west. The King of England put a proclamation line saying that you can push further west than this line. A lot of colonists, they were seeing this as impeding their westward conquest. Britain also has massive debts after the war with France. The government decides the American colonies should pay more tax. Members of Parliament think colonies should bear a little bit of the cost of this war that they have won together. Colonists don't agree. So there's sort of a slow growth of frustration in the colonies over the earliest that men back in Britain should be able to rule them. The hotspot for this growing anger is the city of Boston, the capital of the Massachusetts colony. Massachusetts is a place full of independent thinkers at this time, and those independent thinkers, as independent thinkers of today, want nothing less than someone telling them what to do. Four events in Boston caused the situation to spiral. In 1765, colonists in Boston rioted against British taxes. Then in 1770, a group of radical British soldiers shot into a mob of civilians. They killed 5 people. It becomes known the Boston Massacre. 3 years later, a group of men brought a British ship at Boston Harbor and dumped 200 chests of tea overboard. It's a protest against British taxes and control over trade, and becomes known as the Boston Tea Party. The British Parliament declared Massachusetts in rebellion. Then in 1775, it all comes to a head. Just outside Boston, 700 British soldiers are confronted by a group of armed civilians shooting Arabs. 8 colonies are killed. The colonies form an army led by the man who became the face of the dollar bill, George Washington. They are officially at war with Britain. The revolution is a war before it is an independence movement, and so colonists are facing involved in a military conflict against their own government, and yet most of them do not think independence is a solution. That is until January 1776, when this man, Thomas Paine, writes a pamphlet calling for independence from Britain and its king. He called his common sense. It is an instant hit, and in message goes the 18th century versions of Borrow. Thomas Paine says, what kind of sense does this make for a small island to rule a continent? With public opinion turning in favor of independence, representatives of 13 colonies meet in Philadelphia. They choose Virginia's delegate Thomas Jefferson to write the first draft of a breakup letter to Britain. At the end of June, it presented to the colonies, and on the 4th of July 1776, representatives of all 13 colonies adopt the Declaration of Independence. The United States of America is born, sort of, because declaring themselves a new country doesn't mean everyone will be okay with it. It's a process. It's not. You sign the Declarations of Independence, everyone accepts you, and it's a very happy movement. You sign the Declarations of Independence and you start the fight to actually retain and keep and preserve your independence. The war escalates. The king sends 32,000 British troops to New York to stop what he sees as a treacherous rebellion. The Americans look to France and Spain for help. Britain is now an enemy to all three. There was a lot of incentive for the other European empires to support this new nation isn't breaking off from England, because who knows what we can get in terms of alliances and economic cooperation if you are the people that have them in this early part of their journeys and is successful. With military and financial help from France and Spain, George Washington leads the American army through 5 years of war with Britain. Tens of thousands are killed in brutal battles. And in 1781, at Yorktown, just 25 kilometers from the first part, Jamestown, Washington surrounds Britain forces. They surrender, and the war is over. The British people, the British Parliament, are tired of this war, tired of paying for it, worried that they might lose other colonies. And the British just basically cut their losses, and Washington and the United States win. This painting is proof that it's a massive breakup. It's done to mark Britain's recognition of American independence. It's never finished. because the British delegates are too ashamed to postpone it. But the Americans are busy building a nation. They write a constitutions with a new idea to have a president in charge. The war hero George Washington is elected in 1789. Fast forward a couple of centuries, and the United States keeps growing until it becomes a continental power. But what happened during the Revolution still plays a big part in how it sees itself. The Constitution really is what allows the United States to exist, to continue to have lasted for 25 to 50 years. The government created during the Revolution could not possibly have had together more than a generation or so. The unanimous elections of George Washington by the Electoral College to be president, it really is what creates a country that can rule itself and that can last. Okay, that's it.